My name is Genevieve Marsh, and I am 63 years old. Last Labor Day weekend, my son's new in-laws invited our two families up to their place on Lake Champlain in Vermont. 4 days, a guest room with a view they pointed out 7 times, and a language they were absolutely certain I could not follow. They spoke it at the dinner table, on the dock at sunset, in the kitchen at 7 in the morning, with their backs to me and their voices not even lowered. The way you talk in front of someone's housekeeper. They called me the bookkeeper, the quiet one. Arthur's sweet mother, who kept the accounts at the cabinet shop. They poured my wine before I asked for it, and not once in 4 days did anyone ask me a single question about myself that required more than one sentence to answer. By Friday evening, I had already heard enough. By Saturday night, I had heard everything. And what I did the following Monday morning in a conference room on State Street in Burlington, with their attorney on speakerphone and my own attorney sitting beside me with her coffee going cold, is the reason I am telling you any of this. Welcome to Strong Mom Stories, where the woman who has been introduced as the bookkeeper is usually the one holding the license. The invitation came from my daughter-in-law, Sasha, in a group text with a color-coded itinerary attached as a PDF. 3 pages. It listed arrival windows and meal times and which kayak was mine to use. There was a paragraph about lake etiquette and a note at the bottom that said, "Jen, no need to bring anything. We have everything you could want." I read it twice at my kitchen table in Shelburne, with my coffee getting cold in front of me. Something about the PDF bothered me. Not the itinerary, the tone of it. The way you schedule a weekend for someone who you do not expect to have an opinion. Then my son called. Arthur, 37 that September, still doing the thing he has done since he was 12, where he talks too fast and laughs a little before the ask. "Mom, it's going to be great. They just want everyone to get to know each other." Not he wanted it, they wanted it. I noticed the difference the same way you notice a draft under a door. I put a bag in the trunk on the Friday of Labor Day weekend and drove north on I-89 through Williston, then along the lake road toward Colchester, past the farms, past the pull-offs, where people stop to photograph the water when they have never seen it before. I have seen it plenty. Bertrand and I drove this road 41 times, once a year every year we were married, because he said Lake Champlain in September was the one thing he would never get tired of. He died in the spring of 2021, in our shop, standing at the planer, with sawdust in his hair. I still drive this road and I still think he is about to say something about the light. I stopped in Williston and bought a jar of local honey and a pound of cheddar from a farm stand, because you do not arrive at someone's house empty-handed. Nobody touched either one all weekend. I should have read that as a signal. I didn't. I was too busy looking at the water. The Devereaux place sits on the eastern shore above South Hero. If you have never seen Lake Champlain in early September with the Adirondacks going blue across the water, I am not sure I can help you picture it. The house is 4,000 square feet of white clapboard and black trimmed windows that somebody had very carefully made to look like it had always been there, when in fact Sasha's father, Philippe, had built it in 2017. He told us this at dinner. He told us the square footage at dinner, too. Philippe met me at the door. 61, silver-haired, the kind of man who shakes hands firmly with women in a way that signals he considers it a compliment. His wife Monique kissed me on both cheeks and said something to Sasha in French without looking at me. I set my bag down and said the drive had been easy. It had not been easy. There had been a backup outside Burlington for 40 minutes, and I had eaten half a granola bar for lunch sitting in traffic. Nobody asked about the drive. What Philippe said to Monique at that door, I will get to. It took me until Saturday to understand the full weight of it, and until Sunday to know what I was going to do. The great room had a wall of cabinetry running floor to ceiling beside the fireplace. Custom work, white oak, full overlay, simple shaker-style doors, with integrated finger pulls and no hardware at all. I noticed it before I put my bag down. I noticed the grain match on the center panels. 2 door pairs, each one book-matched so the figure in the wood opened outward like an unfurling fern. When you cut a board and then flip the consecutive slice, the pattern mirrors. Do it right, and a cabinet looks like it grew that way. Do it wrong, and it looks like two boards from two different trees that nobody bothered to introduce. Whoever made that cabinet had done it right. The figure crossed the seam between doors without interrupting itself. I stood there longer than a guest should. Beautiful, isn't it? Monique said from behind me. We had it made locally. She said locally, the way you say locally, when you mean locally is where the craftspeople are. I said it was exceptional work. Not one of them asked how I knew what book matching was. Not one of them asked why a woman they had already decided was Arthur's sweet bookkeeper mother would look at a cabinet the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. They had decided what I was before I walked through the door, and 4 days was not going to be enough time to revise it. Here is the part they did not ask about. In April of 1991, I drove a rented Taurus to Montreal for the first time to meet a lumber broker named Thérèse Pelletier, whose family had been cutting hardwood in the Laurentian forests since before either of us was born. I sat in her office above a lumber yard in Laval with the smell of fresh-cut walnut coming through the window, and I could not follow a word of what she said to her assistant. She had been perfectly polite to me in English. Then she picked up the phone and I was invisible. I flew home from Dorval Airport, and in January of 1992 I enrolled in continuing French at Burlington Community College. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6:15. A classroom that smelled like chalk and old carpet. I stayed for 3 years. After that, I kept going on my own through tapes and dictionaries and one very good grammar book I still have on my nightstand. I did not learn that language to be clever. I fell in love with it the way you fall in love with anything you do not expect. I loved that it has specific words for the way grain runs in figured wood. I loved that Thérèse laughed differently when I finally answered her in French, genuinely, not politely, and that the laugh sounded like surprise and respect, arriving at the same moment. Bertrand and I traveled to Quebec 11 times for business. Every single trip, I was the one who negotiated the prices and got the better lead times. He would sit beside me with his coffee and shake his head slowly and say, "Jen, I married the right one." In 1998, I sat for the Federal Customs Broker License examination. It is a 5-hour test administered by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The pass rate in most years runs around 20%. I passed it the first time. The license allows the holder to conduct customs business on behalf of importers. Our company's import operations have run under my individual license since the day we cleared our first container from Montreal. That license belongs to me, not to Marsh Fine Millwork Incorporated. When I stop supervising entries, it stops working. Nobody in the Devereaux family knew that license existed. I am now telling you why that mattered. Dinner Friday was 8 people at a farmhouse table. Philippe and Monique, Sasha and Arthur, a couple from 2 properties down whose names I have already forgotten, and me at one end with a glass of wine I was mostly using to give my hands something to do. The neighbors asked what I did before I retired. I opened my mouth. Arthur answered for me. "Mom ran the books at our shop for years," he said it pleasantly. "The way you say something you have said many times until it sounds like the truth." "Something like that," I said. I have been saying something like that for 3 years, since Bertrand died, and Arthur took the president title, and the short version became easier than the long one. The long one is the true one. Monique leaned towards Sasha and said in French, low but not low enough, "Thank God." I was afraid we'd spend the whole weekend talking about lumber. Sasha laughed. So the table laughed because Sasha laughed, and that is how a table works. I took a sip of my wine. The roast chicken was very good. After dinner, Philippe walked me out to the dock to tell me about his business, which he experienced as being generous with his time. They had done hotel and resort development in Vermont and upstate New York for 22 years. He described properties the way men describe racehorses. Then his voice changed, got quieter and got interesting. 3 years ago, they had a fire at one of his lodges, faulty HVAC installation. The building was insured. The liability fight went on for 14 months. When it finally ended, he needed to rebuild the entire interior from studs out. Custom millwork, cabinetry, the whole package. The contractor he used had sourced timber from somewhere that wasn't where the paperwork said. Turned out to be imported softwood graded as domestic. The customs documentation was wrong. The whole job had to be re-inspected. Do you know what that costs at the tail end of a 14-month insurance fight? I know exactly what it costs, not just the money, the time, the reputation, the broker fees, the CBP audit that follows. I said it sounded expensive. He said he was 61 years old and had to explain to his bank why a $340,000 contract had turned into a $610,000 one. He swirled his glass. They don't punish you for being wrong, he said. They punish you for trusting the wrong people. Then he smiled and topped off my glass. Anyway, water under the bridge. He said it like a man closing a door he had already checked 3 times. Saturday morning, I was up at 5:30. I made coffee in a kitchen with more counter space than my whole downstairs and took my book to the window seat in the great room where I could watch the lake go from dark to silver to that flat copper color it gets before the sun clears the Vermont hills. I had brought my French grammar book. I still work through it when I travel. I am 63 years old and I still look things up. Sasha came down at 7:15 in a robe with her hair perfect, which I have not managed in 30 years. "Oh, let me," she said, and picked up my grammar book from the window seat cushion before I could answer. She carried it to the shelf beside the fireplace and slid it in spine first so all you could see was the page edges. So it doesn't leave a mark on the cushion. There was a folded throw blanket 6 inches from where the book had been. Then she looked at where I was sitting and tilted her head. "You'd be so much more comfortable in the armchair," she said. "It's better for your back." The armchair faced the fireplace, away from the lake. I sat in it and thanked her. She is 31. She speaks in a soft voice and she never raises it, and in about 4 minutes she had moved my book, my seat, and the direction I was looking. And she had done all of it in front of me, out loud, with a smile and a reason for each one. "You just relax, Jen," she said. "This weekend is about you." She said it at 7:20. By 7:40, she was on the dock with her mother, and neither of them came back inside for over an hour. Saturday afternoon, we took the pontoon out. Philippe drove. Arthur sat up front with a beer he wasn't drinking. Sasha arranged the seats, including a folded towel she placed beside me as though I had mentioned being cold. Out on the open water, the wind comes across the broadest part of the lake and takes anything that isn't held down. I kept one hand on the brim of my hat and my face into it, and looked like an old woman enjoying a boat ride. I was, and I was also listening, because engine noise makes people careless. Philippe leaned toward Arthur and said something in French under the motor. I caught most of it, the transition being clean, the licensing piece handled before the filing date. Arthur said something back I couldn't hear over the engine. Philippe nodded and said, in French, "She won't complicate it. She never has." To anyone else on that boat, that was 2 men talking about business. To me, it was a sentence I needed to think about. A customs broker license is what makes a company's imports legal. It is held by an individual. The company files entries under the broker's license number. If the broker withdraws, retires, transfers responsibility, stops supervising entries, the company has to find a new licensed broker before it can clear another container from overseas. Finding a new broker takes time. Getting your file transferred with CBP takes longer. In the hardwood trade, where lead times from Quebec run 14 to 18 weeks, the gap between licensed and unlicensed is not an abstraction. It is your production schedule for the next 6 months. I held my hat and watched the Adirondacks across the water and did the arithmetic that you do not want to do about your son's father-in-law. Late afternoon, I went up from the dock to get a jacket because the wind had turned and I am 63. And I know what that costs me. Philippe was standing at the top of the porch steps on his phone, his back to the house, his voice not lowered because there was nobody within 40 feet except a woman he had already decided was scenery. "Roland, just listen. The licensing issue is handled. She's a formality. She'll sign the amendment because Arthur will put it in front of her, and she signs what Arthur puts in front of her. A pause. The mother is background. She always has been. I did not stop walking. I slowed for about 3 steps and kept moving, because the only thing worse than being underestimated is letting them find out you noticed. I got my jacket. On the way back through the great room, I stopped at the cabinet wall beside the fireplace. I put my hand flat on the center panel of the lower left door. There was a detail at the corner where the face frame met the door, a small hand-cut chamfer, 45 degrees, just deep enough to catch the light from the window. We started doing that chamfer in 2009. Bertrand had seen it on a piece of shaker furniture at a museum in Pittsfield and come home and showed it to our lead carpenter, Victor, and Victor had taught it to every apprentice we have had since. You will not find it on production cabinetry. It is something you learn in a shop that has been making the same things long enough to have opinions about corners. I stood in that woman's great room with my hand on my own work. If you have ever recognized yourself in somebody's house and said nothing about it, you already know exactly how the rest of this goes. Before dinner, I went out past the garage where I had 1 bar of signal and called Chester Boylan, our CPA. Chester has done the books for Marsh Fine Millwork since 1993. He delivers every piece of news in the exact same voice, which is the voice of a man who has already made peace with the information before you call. I asked about the quarterly payroll filing. We handled it in 90 seconds. Then he said, "Oh, while I have you, your book value cycle is coming up in October. Same method as always, same base year." I said same as always and we hung up. Here is what that phrase meant, because it is the whole story, and at the time it felt like nothing. Book value is what a company is worth on paper, using the numbers as they were recorded when they happened. Our building in Shelburne and our equipment sit on the books at the prices we paid for them in 1987 and 1991. The building alone is carried at $94,000. A commercial appraiser came through in 2023 and put it at $1.7 million. The books do not care. The books say $94,000, and they will say so until somebody sells the building. I have loved book value my entire career. It is a number that tells the complete truth about the past and a useful lie about the present, and it never apologizes for either. I put my phone in my pocket and went back inside and did not think about any of it again that night. After dinner, Monique and I washed the wine glasses because she doesn't trust Crystal to the dishwasher and neither do I, and that turned out to be the only thing we had in common. She had been at the wine since 5. Not unsteady, loosened. "You know where I'm from," she said. I said I didn't. "Vermont," she said. "Small town." My father ran the maintenance crew for a paper mill in Barr for 26 years. She rinsed a glass and held it up. My mother cleaned rooms at a motor inn on Route 2. She came home with her hands red to the wrist every night in winter. I got a scholarship to Middlebury. I studied French literature because it was the furthest thing from a motor inn I could imagine. I went to Paris when I was 22. She set the glass carefully on the rack. I have not been cold since. For about 3 seconds, I almost liked her. 3 seconds is what it lasted, because she turned to me with the dish towel over her shoulder, and she smiled a warm, comfortable, confiding smile, and she said, "That's how you always know. You can smell it on people, Jen. Where they started and how far they actually got." I dried a glass and set it on the shelf. I thought about a woman coming home in Vermont winter with her hands split open, and I thought about how her daughter had gotten out and spent 30 years since deciding who else deserved to make the same trip. "Good night, Monique," I said. The house went quiet around 11. I came downstairs at 11:50 for water, no glasses on, feeling my way by the Smalls lights set into the base of each stair riser, because every detail in that house had been thought about. Philippe was at the kitchen island with a short glass of bourbon and 2 sheets of paper laid square on the granite, a pen across them like a bookmark. He slid them toward me the way you slide someone a slice of birthday cake. "Jen, perfect. Saves me tracking you down in the morning. It's just a cleanup document for the operating restructure." Roland drafted it. 2 pages. I put my reading glasses on. I have worn them since 2006. I read the way I have read documents for 30 years, which is slowly and out of order, recitals first. Because the recitals are where people tell you what they meant before the lawyers got involved. The heading said Amendment to Operating Agreement and Consent of Interest Holder. The first recital referenced a postnuptial agreement between Arthur Marsh and Sasha Devereaux Marsh, dated July 14, 2026. The operative paragraph asked me, as the other member of the company's management board, to consent to and waive any transfer restrictions dated March 3, 1980 Agreement, 1987, as amended. 3 things arrived in my head at once, and they arrived in this order. My son had signed something 6 weeks ago and had not told me. This weekend had been planned around that signature, and whoever drafted this amendment had read the 1987 shareholders agreement with a great deal of care. I set the papers down on the granite gently. The glass still made a sound. "I left my reading glasses in the car," I said. "These are my distance pair. I'll look at it Monday." I was wearing my reading glasses. He could not have known that, because to know it, he would have had to look at my face at some point in 2 full days. Philippe laughed and put his hand flat on the 2 pages. "Jen, it's genuinely just a formality." "Then Monday won't change anything," I said. He said something about how tired I must be from the drive. I said goodnight, took my water upstairs, and did not sleep for a single minute. This old Vermont farmhouse has wide pine floors and interior walls built before insulation codes meant anything. My room was directly above the kitchen. At 12:15, I heard chairs move. Sasha in French, not bothering to lower her voice. "What if she reads the amendment carefully?" Monique answered, flat as a news anchor, "Don't worry about it. She doesn't follow the numbers." Then Philippe, in English, because Philippe does everything that matters in English. Roland says once the consent is filed, the import licensing situation resolves on its own. A chair, water running. Somebody laughed at something small. I lay on my back in a guest room in a house on Lake Champlain and counted the ceiling boards. And there were 11, and I counted them more times than that. I was not sure yet what the it was. I only knew that there was an it, and that it had been scheduled, and that my leaving was somewhere on the schedule. I have been in rooms where people talked over my head in a language I was not supposed to own. I had promised myself on the drive home from Montreal in 1991 that it would not happen to me twice. I put my bag in the trunk at 6:40 Sunday morning. The lake was absolutely flat. There was mist lifting off it in long, slow sheets. It was, and I will give them that much, the most beautiful thing I had looked at since the spring before Bertrand died. Arthur came out to the car in bare feet, holding his coffee mug. "You're leaving early." "Long drive," I said. I closed the trunk and turned around. "What did you sign on July 14th? His face went red from the collar up. "It does that. It has done that since he was 8. It's just asset protection, Mom." Philippe walked me through the whole thing. It's completely standard. "Did you read the 1987 agreement before you signed?" He looked at his coffee. "What's in it?" He didn't answer, and that was the answer. The 1987 shareholders agreement. He had signed it at my kitchen table. He was 26, buying in. He had a pen in one hand and a piece of my apple cake in the other, and he signed 3 pages without turning any of them over. I let him because he was 26 and I thought there would be time. That was my mistake, and I had been carrying it for 11 years. "You knew I speak French, Arthur." He kept looking at the mug. "Go back inside," I said. "It's your party." I drove south on Route 2 and then back on I-89. Did not turn the radio on for an hour, did not go home. I drove to Shelburne and out to the industrial park on Bostwick Road, where Marsh Fine Millwork has been operating since we bought the building in 1991. The gate was padlocked. I have had a key to that lock since the afternoon Bertrand and I drove together to the title office to sign the deed. I let myself in the side entrance, turned on the shop lights, stood in the smell of sawdust and linseed oil while the building did what an empty building does, which is settle and tick and breathe slowly. There is a fire-rated file cabinet in the back office. I have been secretary and a board member of this corporation since we filed the Articles of Incorporation on March 3, 1987, which is a thing the Devereaux family had understood the way you understand a sentimental title, the way you make the wife the treasurer of the neighborhood association to make her feel included. I took out the shareholders' agreement, sat down in Bertrand's chair, which nobody has moved in 3 years, turned on his desk lamp. Read Section 6 out loud in that empty shop because you catch more in a document when you make your mouth do the work. Section 6.1. No member or shareholder shall transfer any ownership interest, voluntarily or involuntarily, without first offering the same to the corporation and then to the remaining shareholders pro rata. Section 6.2. Transfer shall include, without limitation, any transfer arising from or pursuant to any marital property agreement, including any postnuptial agreement. I read that sentence 4 times in Bertrand's chair, with the shop cooling around me. Section 6.3. Purchase price shall be book value per share, determined by the corporation's accountant in accordance with the company's historical accounting method. Section 6.4. Written notice within 15 days of the triggering instrument, 30 days for the remaining members to elect. I sat there with my hand over my mouth like a woman at a reckoning, because I understood finally what the whole weekend had been. Every arranged seat, every poured glass, every page of that itinerary. They needed my signature on that amendment, because the moment Arthur signed a postnuptial agreement, he had made me an offer under a document he signed at my kitchen table at 26. He did not know he had done it, but under Section 6.2, he had put 55% of Marsh Fine millwork in front of his mother and asked if she wanted it at book value, and that section had been sitting in a fireproof cabinet waiting for exactly this situation for 39 years. I drove home and sat at my kitchen table and opened Bertrand's grammar book. His handwriting was still in the margins, little notes he made when he was trying to follow along during our Quebec trips. I did not need to look anything up. I just needed to hold something he had held. Monday morning, I sat across from my attorney, Rosabeth Quinn, in her office on State Street. Rosabeth does corporate work for small manufacturers, and she reads documents the way surgeons operate, without expression and without hurrying. She finished in 8 minutes, set the agreement down, and said, "This clause has been exercised before. Statement, not a question." 2009, I said. My brother-in-law held 20% from 1994. He passed away. Bertrand and I bought his shares at book value under this exact section. His widow had an attorney who looked at it for a month and told her to accept the price. You were involved in that transaction. I signed heck. Rosabeth straightened the papers. Then it isn't decorative, she said. A restriction nobody has ever enforced starts to look like a suggestion. One that's been enforced once cleanly, with counsel on the other side who folded, is a live wire. She walked me through the timeline twice in plain language because I asked her to. The postnuptial dated July 14th was the triggering instrument. Arthur owed me written notice within 15 days, by July 29th. He gave no notice to anyone. My election window runs from actual knowledge. July 20th, 11:50 at night, standing in a kitchen, I was being asked to sign away. You have until August 19th, she said. How fast can you move the money? How much time do I have if I stop being patient? Enough, she said. Chester Boylan issued a book value certificate on Wednesday. He did it because I requested it, as a shareholder and an officer, which is a request he has honored from me every year since the company opened. The number came back at $141 per share. 8,000 shares unchanged since incorporation, because Bertrand did not believe in diluting anything he had worked for. I hold 3,600 shares. Arthur holds 4,400. He bought 2,600 of those from us in 2014 on an 8-year note he finished paying off in 2022. The other 1,800 came from Bertrand's estate. 4,400 shares at $141,640. Here is the other number, In September of 2024, a regional millwork group out of New Hampshire sent Arthur and whole company $6.8 million. He called me excited. We both said no and felt very good about ourselves for a week. 55% of $6.8 million is $3.74 million, $620,400, and $3,740,000. Same shares, same week, two entirely different. And the only thing standing between them is a section I drafted on a rented typewriter in 1987, because I had read enough contracts by then to know we needed it. I went to Green Mountain Community Bank on Thursday, sat across from a loan officer who was about 42 and very courteous about everything. He looked at the file, looked at me, and then asked whether I had someone helping me look this over. I did not get angry. Getting angry at a man for saying out loud what a room has been thinking is a waste of good afternoon. I slid 2 documents across the desk. The book value certificate and the 2024 letter of intent from New Hampshire valuing the company at $6.8 million. You'd be lending me $310,400, I said, against collateral that a strategic buyer priced at $3.06 million 18 months ago. Your loan to value is under 11%. He read both pages twice. He asked, on my way out the door, what year I passed my customs broker exam. 1998, I said. He said, I'll have the commitment letter to you this afternoon. That same week I called Thérèse Pelletier in Laval. 10 in the morning here is 4 in the afternoon there, and I have known that time difference since before my son could read a clock. We spoke in French for 20 minutes the way 2 people talk when they have done business together for over 30 years. Her granddaughter had started at the yard. They had moved a warehouse. Then she said, a man named Devereaux has been calling my office. Wants to establish a new import account for a company being formed in Vermont. I didn't say anything for 2 seconds. Thérèse, she said, why is your name on the party invitation he sent to my assistant? There are approximately 30 active licensed customs brokers working the softwood and hardwood import trade in New England. 30. It is a small world and everyone knows who pays net 30 and who is still arguing about an invoice from 3 years back. Philippe Devereaux had invited Thérèse to his Labor Day gathering because he believed the supplier relationship belonged to Marshfine Millwork, the company. It has never belonged to the company. It has belonged since 1992 to a woman he had listed on a guest list as Arthur's mother. He put you down as the mother, Thérèse said. That is exactly why I said yes. I wanted to see what kind of man writes that. Also, she added, his French is embarrassing. On the following Thursday, Rosabeth's office produced 3 pages. Notice of election to purchase pursuant to Section 6.4 of the Shareholders' Agreement of Marshfine Millwork Incorporated. Electing to purchase all 4,400 shares held by Arthur B. Marsh. Purchase price $620,400, computed at $141 per share, per the certificate of the corporation's accountant, dated August 5, 2026. Bank commitment letter attached. Because an election you cannot fund is a bluff. I have never in my life sent a bluff. I drove the certified mail to the post office on Shelburne Road myself and stood in line behind a man mailing a tackle box. The clerk stamped the green return receipt cards and handed me the tracking numbers. The last 4 digits of mine were 3891, expected delivery Monday. That Saturday evening, Sasha texted me, still on for Sunday? Dad's doing an announcement at the cottage. I read that message for a while. I want to be honest about what I decided and why. I am not built for confrontation. I am built for documentation. But the envelope was already in the federal mail stream and it was going to arrive Monday, regardless of where I was on Sunday. Whatever happened at that party, that letter was landing in the morning. I could not have stopped it if I had wanted to. I did not want to. I typed back, yes. Sunday afternoon, 40 people on that lawn. Neighbors, contractors Philippe had worked with, a couple of people from Sasha's firm, a woman named Deb from the next property down who told me her cousin lived in Burlington, and that was the nicest 3 minutes of either weekend combined. At 4:30, Philippe stepped up onto the porch steps and tapped a fork against his glass. Family, he said, is the best kind of partnership. He waited for the laughter to finish. Then he announced that by October, Marsh Fine Millwork would be operating as Devereaux Marsh Custom Interiors, aligned with Devereaux Property Group. Monique put her hand over her heart. Sasha beamed. Arthur stood beside her, with both hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes on the grass, and I looked at my son and thought, 37 years old, and did not finish the thought. Then the front door opened. Thérèse Pelletier came through that great room the way she comes through every room, which is directly and slightly impatient with whatever is in the path. 64. Linen, shirt, reading glasses pushed back into her hair where they live. Philippe saw her and started across the room with both arms already rising, already saying her name with the accent he is proud of. She walked past him. She came straight to where I was standing beside the cabinet wall with a glass of white wine I had not touched, and she took both my hands and kissed me on both cheeks and started talking immediately. In French, fast and warm and full of names and years. A shipment that had sat in Albany for 3 weeks in 2018 because the truck driver had the wrong delivery window. Her daughter, who used to answer the office phone at 9 years old and call me the American lady who was always right about the tonnage. And I answered her in French. All of it, without pausing to search, because that is what 32 years inside a language actually sounds like. A room doesn't go silent. That is a movie. A real room drops one register all at once, the way a furnace shuts off. 40 people kept talking. Every one of them got quieter. 2 of the contractors turned all the way around in their chairs. Monique was standing near the window with a bottle in her hand. I watched the color leave her face in sections. Thérèse looked around the room and said in English, in the particular voice she uses for spaces that have gotten too comfortable with themselves. Why is everyone so quiet? She is the only person here I came for. Philippe recovered quickly. He has been charming in difficult rooms for a long time. He laughed and clapped his hands once and stepped to the kitchen island and picked up 2 sheets of paper. The same 2 sheets. He had them out on a Sunday at a party next to the honey I had brought and nobody had touched. Jen, while we've got everyone here, he gestured toward a man in a golf shirt near the hallway who had been working very hard at looking relaxed. Let's just get the consent signed tonight and make it official. I set my wine glass down on the granite very carefully. It still made a sound. In a room that had already dropped 1 level, 40 people heard it. She doesn't follow the numbers, I said, in French, looking at Monique. Monique's mouth opened. You said that at 12:15 Saturday night, I said. In the kitchen, directly below my room. The floors in this house are pine. Pine carries sound. I was not loud. I have never once in my life gotten anywhere lasting by being loud. I looked at Philippe. Section 6.2 of the Shareholders' Agreement of Marsh Fine Millwork, Incorporated, dated March 3, 1987. Transfer shall include any transfer arising from her enfant or pursuant to any marital property agreement, including any postnuptial agreement. When Arthur signed on July 14th, that was a transfer within the meaning of that section. It triggered my right of first refusal. It also triggered his obligation to give me written notice within 15 days. He gave notice to no one. My election window runs from actual knowledge. Sunday, July 20th, 11:50 at night, in your kitchen. My attorney mailed my election Thursday morning, certified, return receipt. Tracking number ends in 3891. It delivers tomorrow morning. Roland, the attorney, near the hallway had gone a color. I don't have a precise name for. Election to do what? Philippe said. To purchase all 4,400 of my son's shares at the price the agreement specifies. Book value per the accountant's certificate. $141 a share. Somebody behind me did the multiplication quietly and got it wrong. $6,400, I said. And the bank commitment letter is in the envelope. Sasha said very fast and very quietly, Dad, what is book value? And I said the thing I had been carrying since the top of those porch steps. You told your attorney that I was a formality. You were right. I'm section 6.2. I typed it in 1987, and it has been a fireproof cabinet in Shelburne ever since, waiting for exactly this. His phone lit up on the island. Roland's name face up on the screen where anyone could read it. He did not answer it. Then he came apart, which I had not expected to affect me the way it did. He got loud about trust and family and 3 years of careful work. He brought his hand down on the granite hard enough to rattle the glasses. Monique went the other direction, which I find harder to watch. She cried. "We welcomed you," she said. "We opened our home." Sasha said my name 4 times in 4 different tones. I did not raise my voice. There was nothing left to say loudly. I turned to Therese and pointed at the cabinet wall. She walked over and looked at it the way you look at a face you recognize. 3 seconds. Then she said in French, "Marsh, the chamfer at the corner. I've seen it in 3 houses in Burlington." "My shop cut those panels," I said. "My shop finished them and edged them. Delivered October 2021 through a fabricator in Williston. Those are my hands on that wall, my team's hands. We have been making that corner for 15 years. Philippe said, "Thick, you always want a medal for work that somebody else paid for." "I made the thing," I said. "You have been standing in front of my work all weekend." One of the contractors, who had been listening very carefully for several minutes, set his glass on a side table, said something quietly to his wife, and they got their coats from the front closet and let themselves out through the screen door. That is what it sounds like when a professional reputation leaves a building. Not dramatic, just a screen door closing. Arthur followed me out to the lawn, full light still, the lake going copper and gold the way it does before the sun finally clears the Vermont hills for the last time on a September evening. Both of us standing there. "Mom, please." I turned around. "Did you read it? The 1987 agreement. Have you ever read it?" "No." "Did you know I speak French?" He looked at the grass. I nodded once. "Here is what happens," I said. "I am purchasing your shares at the price in the agreement. That closes in October, and then I am going to put a written offer in your hands to buy those same shares back from me. Same section, same price, $141, good for 5 years. He stared at me. "What's the condition?" "You come alone," I said, "and you read every page before you sign it." From up on the porch, Sasha called his name. My son turned his head toward the porch. He did not go toward it. He just turned his head. But I had my answer before he said anything, and so did he, and we both stood there on that lawn knowing it. "Go on inside," I said. "I meant it kindly. Every word of it kindly. It's your party." I drove home south through Williston in the full dark. The radio came on and I let it play. The green card came back Monday, signed for at 9:58 in the morning. Roland sent 2 letters over the following week. The first claimed my election was untimely. The second claimed a postnuptial agreement did not constitute a transfer within the meaning of Section 6.2. Rosabeth answered both with 1 letter and 1 attachment, which was a photocopy of the 1987 signature page, with Arthur's name on it, in his own handwriting. Nobody sued. People with a real argument sue. People without 1 write letters and hope you'll get tired. We closed on a Thursday in October in a conference room on State Street. $624,000, $310,000 of it mine. $310,400 drawn on the line at Green Mountain Community Bank, which I am paying down at $3, $800 a month, and expect to have clear in 7 years, when I will be 70. I own all 8,000 shares of Marsh Fine Millwork Incorporated. Therese's office sent Philippe Devereaux a 2-sentence email the following month. The consortium establishes import accounts for brokers with 5 consecutive years of clean CBP filings. His new entity had none. My company's customs bond is still at its base level, because I have never once given anyone at Customs and Border Protection a reason to look at us. I am the reason for that. I have spent enough years not saying it out loud. All 14 of our people still have their jobs. Victor still runs the shop floor and still teaches every new apprentice the same hand-cut chamfer at the corner, 45 degrees, softened just enough to catch the light, because that is how Bertrand saw it done 30 years ago, and that is how we do it. Arthur rents the apartment above the shop. He comes in every morning. He is learning to read the paperwork, and he is good at the work. And he is now an employee of a company he used to be the president of, which is a sentence he has not said out loud yet, and I am not going to say it for him. We eat lunch together on Fridays. We don't talk about the agreement. Monique sent a note in November on cream paper with a small watercolor of Lake Champlain on the front. She wrote that she hoped I could see this as an unfortunate misunderstanding and move forward with grace. I sat down twice with a pen and could not find one true sentence to put on paper. I am 63 years old, and I have run out of patience for sending false ones. Bertrand's grammar book sits open on my kitchen table now. I stopped putting it away for company. Next to it is an envelope addressed to my son. Inside is a one-page offer to sell him 4,400 shares of Marsh Fine Millwork at $141 a share, good through October 14, 2031. I have not mailed it yet. He knows it exists. That is the entire point of it existing. I am not angry at those people. I decided long ago that anger is expensive, and I have always watched my expenses carefully. What I am is done explaining myself to anyone who finished deciding what I was before I sat down at their table. Here is the only piece of this I would hand to anyone else. When someone tells a room that you don't follow the numbers, that sentence has never once decided what you understand. It only decides how much they will say in front of you. And if you can stay quiet a little longer, they will say enough. They always say enough. And then they will hand you the document themselves. And all you have to do is read it. I typed mine in 1987. It was still there.